Well, the U.S. has deployed planes to the region to test the air and collect particles from the test. The Japanese Defense Ministry also sending similar planes as the two countries work together to learn more. Let's bring in Jim Walsh with MIT Security Studies Program for more insight into the U.S. response to North Korea. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. I've looked at some of the work. You've obviously had extensive research and commentary on North Korea. I want to ask you, does this test fundamentally change the landscape and the situation that we've seen, the escalation that we've seen in the past 6 months?
I don't think it fundamentally changes the landscape. We know that they have a nuclear capability. This is their 6th test, and they've been getting better and better at things as they've gone along. So I guess I'm not too surprised that this yield was the largest yield they've achieved. But, you know, I do think it may be a tipping point either politically or psychologically, and that's going to depend on how the leaders in the region and in the United States respond over these coming days and weeks. I think it is a serious situation, but I think you're right to say the fundamentals are pretty much the same as they were yesterday.
So that you brought up a good point. Is it a tipping point? Does Kim Jong-un have more momentum, and if so, does this mean that the threats, the sanctions that some were supportive, some were critical, that they didn't go far enough, they're simply not influencing the regime?
I think that's a fair statement. You know, we have a long track record now, and we have lots and lots and lots of tests, nuclear and missile tests, and we keep passing more and more sanctions. So whether, I'm not going to say that the sanctions are unhelpful or they don't have a place, but it's pretty clear that we have a disconnect here, that they can build missiles and nuclear weapons faster than we can impose sanctions that would matter. So we're losing that particular race. We can, impose costs on them. Right. And that's good, but that's not changing their behavior, and they seem to be doing things at a faster pace, not a slower pace.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. You know, the military exercises that they say they're so furious about, I mean, that's nothing new. I'm just sort of wondering why they're trying to demonstrate something, with such fervor. It seems as if it's really been ratcheted up, and I'm curious, what's the end game for the regime, really?
Elizabeth, that's the million-dollar question. If we had that answer, which goes to the issue of North Korean intentions, I think we'd have a lot more confidence in our policies or our strategy. It's because there are lots of possibilities here. Why did they do it? And I think the really interesting question is they've been able to do this since the spring. So it's not so much that they did it, it's they did it today or last night. And so the question is, why now? And so some people say it's to send a message to Americans on Labor Day. Others say it's to send a message to the Chinese when they're hosting a major summit of leading countries. Others say, this is just what they do. They tested last September a nuclear weapon, and they're just sort of going along. Another theory is that they're trying to, this is classic North Korean behavior, try to raise the crisis level and then pivot to negotiations at the height of a crisis. Which of these? I don't know.
Right. That sort of brings me to my last question, and unfortunately we only have about 30 seconds left, but I'm curious as to what can diplomacy achieve that maybe harsher sanctions cannot achieve?
Well, it takes two to tango. So the North Koreans have to want to negotiate, and they're sending mixed messages. They tell me and others that they do, and then they do other things that make this more difficult. But if there are negotiations, it means you could get a freeze. You're probably not going to get a stop, but you'll get a freeze on the testing, which would be good. You're talking to each other, which is important because the real danger here is miscalculation and misperception, an accidental war that no one actually wants. So talking, whether you get an agreement or not, can be helpful. Hold your friends close and your enemies closer. Right. So that you don't make mistakes. And
of course, I think you'd agree that freezing wouldn't necessarily halt their program, but like you said, it would be progress, which I'm stealing from some of your work. Sir, thank you so much. Jim, I appreciate it. Thank you for joining us.